It's a touching moment for me. This will be my last public event as Prime Minister. So or one of my it's my last one till Sunday night anyway. So it is a big moment for me to be home here in Montreal, able to do this.
Well, it is the end of an era, as this afternoon Justin Trudeau participated in his last event as Prime Minister, because in 2 days, the Liberal Party will choose his replacement. The race is between Mark Carney, Chrystia Freeland, Karina Gould, and Frank Baylis. Voting for the new leader began last Wednesday and will end this Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. The results will be announced shortly after at an event in Ottawa. I'm joined now by the CBC's chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton. Rosie, here we are, the last day going into the weekend. Does anything happen in this final week to change the expectation that this is really Mark Carney's race to lose on Sunday?
I don't think anything substantial has changed really since the debate. In fact, I would suggest that what we've seen from Donald Trump has kind of intensified or clarified the race in some ways in terms of who is suited to deal with this. And I think you would look at the experience and say that there are two people who have real experience in the economic sector and diplomatic sector, Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland. However, the issue of momentum for Mark Carney, I think, is undeniable. There was a big rally there in Montreal yesterday. Yeah. Really hundreds of people turned out. There's another one tonight in Mississauga that is expected to be pretty significant as well. And again, I think when Liberals are looking to see who's best placed to win the next election, they're looking at the same polling we're looking at. And so they might make a decision based on who they think can bring them back from where they were under Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, and of those two candidates with the economic experience, he's the one who represents change, right?
That's right, exactly.
And so look, 400,000 people signed up to vote in this. More than 100,000 have voted, but there have been some issues with the validation process and the voting process. What's your sense of how much that might be affecting this race?
I actually talked to the caucus chair today, Brenda Shanahan, who is remained neutral in this, but she told me that there are a lot of people working on this. And she did say people of her generation are having a harder time with the app than others. Right. Take that for what it's worth. But there are a lot of people, MPs, people inside the party who are there to help people through it. I think we're up to about 150,000 verified voters. I don't think it's going to delay results on Sunday. That is not the impression I'm getting. Remember, you can still vote up until I think it's tomorrow at 11:59 p.m. You can still get verified. So it was a bump in the road for sure for some people, but I'm not sure it's going to result in a change in terms of when we find out who is the next leader.
Yeah, I guess it's a question of if the margin is super tight and people couldn't vote because you have to start the validation by 5 o'clock today, and then it can be processed till midnight, and you can vote till 3 on Sunday, and who knows where the margins would be. So then the question is the transition, right? Of how quickly whoever wins moves in and Justin Trudeau moves out. What's our latest understanding and best understanding on that? Yeah,
there's lots of conversations happening with different teams. Let's say that they are more advanced with one team than they are with other teams, for sure. I think it depends on who wins. We understand that. If you do not have a seat in Parliament, you are going to have to get your ducks in a row very quickly, and you're going to have to decide very quickly whether you want an election as well. But I think that there is also, because of the crisis that the country is dealing with, a desire for this person to move into the job as Prime Minister very quickly and make sure they have the right people around them. I think that will happen within a matter of days. So not Sunday, maybe not even Monday, because there are some technicalities around Rideau Hall and things like that. But in the early days of next week, the Prime Minister and potentially a new cabinet or a slightly different cabinet will be sworn in. And then some of those people will make their way inside the Prime Minister's office as well. Again, it really depends on who wins in terms of how quickly we get to an election. But Mark Carney has said very publicly that he believes that he needs a mandate in order to govern. And he certainly seems to be leaning towards that idea.
So it seems almost certain we will have a transition next week. It won't be delayed into a second week. Almost certainly by this time next Friday, it'll all be done.
And listen, I don't think Justin Trudeau wants to stick around either. From all the language that we're hearing from him, we are going to hear from him on Sunday. He will give his final speech as Prime Minister, really. We'll also hear from Jean Chrétien, former Prime Minister. They are viewing Sunday not only as the next Liberal leader, but as an attempt to kind of rally the troops and get them geared up for the potential idea of an election and get them thinking that maybe things aren't going to be quite as bad as they had thought a couple months ago.
Okay, Rosie, great stuff. That's our chief political correspondent, Rosemary Barton.
See you Sunday.
I'm joined now by Terry Duguid, the national campaign chair or the co-chair for the Liberal Party. Terry Duguid, it's good to see you, sir. Thank you for being here today.
Great to be with you.
Those are large numbers in voting, but 400,000 people signed up to be registered voters in this race, and we're hearing a lot of stories about problems with verification. How bad is the situation right now in terms of the number of people who aren't able to vote because of these challenges?
Well, David, this is the most secure, accessible leadership vote in our history. As you know, we've had to take certain precautions because of foreign interference. And so there have been some challenges with the voting system. We're working through them. One of them, of course, is matching ID. Sometimes the voter ID in our database doesn't match what is on the photo ID. Robert maybe on one, Rob on another, and we have an army of volunteers that is working through that and helping people vote. We also have change of address issues, a variety of other issues, but again, I would say the party is working very, very hard on that. 156,000 people are registered, 130,000 approximately have voted, so the system is working, and still a few days to go.
Okay, that sounds secure, but it doesn't sound super accessible, right? I mean, if people can't vote because of these differences, we've heard there's maybe challenges with accents on French names and hyphenated names. I mean, is it really this basic? And how many people is it? I mean, are we talking more than 1,000? Are we talking 2,000? Or are we just talking in the hundreds? What's the order of magnitude of this problem?
I don't have the exact number off the top of my head, but what I can tell you is the party has an army of volunteers. This is our preoccupation for the next 2 days, so we are on it. We've had to take certain precautions because of security issues that are well known coming out of the Hogue Commission, those issues related to foreign interference. So we take that very seriously. But on the issue of accessibility, I mean, this voting method is accessible to the folks in Nunavut from the far reaches of our country. So this number that we have already that has voted has exceeded the number in the previous leadership campaign.
Right. Look, and I appreciate the ability of people to vote remotely and virtually, but I talked to a liberal who has gotten through the verification process, but the ballot that she was sent, there's no names on it. There's no one to vote for. So there are some glitches here. I guess I wonder, we don't know what the margins will be, but you know, if it's super tight, problems like this become bigger problems, right, in a situation like that. So how confident are you going to have this sorted out by the end of the verification process tomorrow night? Because Karina Gould, one of the candidates, was asking for an extension of 24 hours.
Well, again, I would just emphasize the security issue. I know our party is working very, very hard on this. I am confident that we are going to have a very decisive result at the end of the day on Sunday. And I just have to re-emphasize, with any new system, of course, there's going to be bugs, but we had to, once again, take this security issue extremely seriously because of foreign countries intervening in our elections, and I think we will have a clear result at the end of Sunday, and we will have a new leader and eventually a new prime minister.
Okay, so how quickly do you think whoever this new leader and new prime minister, and certainly would be prime minister designate on Sunday night, will move into the job full time, and then how quickly do you think we end up in an election? Because I think the last time we spoke, you were the Liberal campaign co-chair. Now you're the campaign chair, because I think, is that because your co-chair decided not to run again? Is that what's going on here? I mean, how quickly do you think we end up in an actual election here, Mr. Duguid?
Well, I think that will be up to the new leader. I think the new leader will take a look at the circumstances we're in, and as you know, we're in very uncertain times. But I do expect that will be happening in the coming week, and that will be up to the new leader.
Okay, just one last question on the voting. If 400,000 people signed up, and you're at 133,000 who have voted right now, are you satisfied with that kind of a ratio in terms of the people? Because I guess not even really voted. 156,000 have had their identities verified. Now that could grow if you sort through the backlog, and others have started that process. But that's less than half at this point. Are you surprised it's not higher than that, given the frenzy to sign people up and get those numbers so high?
Well, I would just say once again, we still have a few days to go. You know, David, I've never seen enthusiasm like this in the party. You know, we have candidates coming forward at a very rapid rate. We had record fundraising in the first quarter of this year, and I know that Liberals are going to show up to vote, and that number is going to grow day by day.
Terry Duguid, campaign chair for the Liberal Party of Canada. It's good to speak with you, sir. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, David.
All right, we're going to talk more about the Liberal leadership race. Up next, we'll get our Liberal insider's take on Justin Trudeau's legacy. Oh, we're going straight through it. We're not taking the break. I apologize. We're going to move right into this Liberal leadership conversation because in less than 48 hours, the Liberals will announce its new leader. So we've got our insiders here. Michelle Cadario is a former Liberal National Campaign Director. Laura D'Angelo is a former advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And here with me in this studio, Cameron Ahmad is the former head of communications to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Sorry about the little glitch there, gang. It's just been one of those weeks with the trade war and the tariffs and all of these things. Cameron, let's start with you. I mean, what are you watching for on Sunday? These challenges with the verification, these challenges getting people to vote, not a story you want going into a transition convention like this, I would suggest.
No, and I suspect they'll overcome these challenges. I mean, it's not going to be perfect. This is a race that was held in a very short time frame. They are using new technology. There's a huge surge, as Terry just talked about, of new supporters and people that have been brought in. What I'm looking for, I think, is what's the energy going to be like? Everything that we've seen so far has been, as Liberals, very positive, right? It feels like a breath of fresh air for our party, a moment of hope where we feel competitive again. And I think another interesting thing that I've really enjoyed seeing from all the candidates is how respectful they've been towards one another. They haven't, obviously the Conservatives have been attacking, and others, but the candidates amongst themselves have been quite respectful and trying, I think, to demonstrate not only that they can have a solid exchange of ideas. Even during the debates, some people were saying, we were kind of hoping that this would be a little bit more, a little bit more elbows up, as we say now. But I think what it shows the country...
There were no elbows in that.
No. What it shows the country, though, is that we can have an exchange of ideas, and politics doesn't have to be as nasty as it seems to be all the time right now. There's a chance that we can bring it back to focusing on ideas, not using ad hominem attacks, and trying to win the election based on optimism.
Okay, I do want to talk about that because, Michelle, we did see the attack from the Conservatives at Mr. Kearney, the perceived frontrunner today. The implication being that because he has wealth and he hasn't disclosed it, you can't trust him to negotiate with Trump because you don't know if he's putting his interests ahead of the country's interests. I mean, there's no evidence that Mr. Kearney would do anything like that. But we do not know what his holdings are because we're in this weird situation where someone who's never held elected office could very well be the Prime Minister in less than a week. Doesn't Mark Carney owe the country a bit of an explanation of what he's worth and where it's held before he seeks a mandate for this job with the Canadian electorate?
Well, first of all, he has to win the job. So, I think we are in a very compressed time period, but I think we have to manage our expectations. And I have every belief, and I think that Mr. Carney has said it, that he's going to follow all the disclosure rules and come out with it. It's also very clear he's had a pretty public life. We kind of know what he's done for good parts of it, and it's been very much in the public service, and both here and in Great Britain. So listen, Paul Martin was someone who very much believed in putting things into a private trust. Or a blind trust, pardon me, and to be as transparent as possible. And in fact, he kind of went out of his way to be a leader in that. And I think that Mr. Carney is someone who believes in that same kind of thing. It's going to be a very short time period from the time that we all presume that he wins to when he has to get that he hopefully will get his disclosure done. But, I think that right now, the Conservatives are just trying to throw anything at the wall and see what will stick. And they've got oodles of money to try a whole bunch of different things. And they're just praying that they can kind of get a foothold and stop the slide that they've been on.
But Laura, he's in no violation of any ethics laws or guidelines or standards by any standard right now. But politically and practically, if Mr. Carney is to win this, as all indications would be, and we've seen he's raised almost $4 million with the latest data that's been released, there are going to be questions about this. I mean, just from a political self-defense exercise, shouldn't he just lay it all on the table for Canadians to see, even in advance of all of the ethics disclosure deadlines?
I mean, of course there are going to be questions, and there should be. He's, currently running to be prime minister. But I also think one of the things that's really interesting about the Conservatives' current line of attack is that they are attacking, right? They're attacking his integrity. They're attacking, Mark Carney for where his holdings are and if he can actually negotiate with Donald Trump in good faith, instead of actually talking about what Pierre Poilievre's going to do and how he's going to negotiate, and talking about how important Canada is, right? I find it really interesting that the Conservatives continue to go down this really negative path, trying to get people angry and really, really frustrated. Right. When, to Cameron's point, right now, the Liberal Party and all four candidates of the Liberal Party are offering a different option, right? They're offering some excitement about Canada again, some excitement around what kind of policies we could have, and some hope that someone will be able to negotiate with Donald Trump and not just take a knee like it looks like Pierre Poilievre might. Right,
but Cameron, just as a former communications guy in this government, the attacks have some traction because Mr. Carney has had some problems communications-wise. Like his answer on the Brookfield relocation the night of the debate was really bad, to the point that he's credibly being called a liar because of the parsing of things that he put on the table. So, he has some challenges there should he win. Just as Chrystia Freeland has legacy connection challenges and communications challenges and these sorts of things. I mean, what would you think they need to do to get around this particular issue and questions about his business background if it's Carney?
I think as a general rule, it's often best to just lay it all out there and be as forthright as you can about the facts and try and get ahead of questions that may come up in the future. That's obviously a lesson we've all learned over time in different circumstances, but it doesn't always seem obvious in the moment. So I think it may be a legitimate question for the Conservatives to ask. It's how they're asking it, which I think, to Laura's point, is a bit of a problem, because right now what Canadians are rightly concerned with, what everyone, frankly the whole world is focused on, is the threat, the very real threat, the impact of tariffs and our relations with the United States and with the rest of the world. And you can raise these kinds of questions, and you can do so in a way that keeps the debate at a sane level without making ad hominem attacks and accusations the way they are. And I think what it demonstrates is, to Laura's point, you're not able to project your ideas forward at a time when everybody is hungry for ideas and hungry for a unified response. And you're trying to make it all about personal differences. And I think that is not the right tone to take. I'm not even talking about the legitimacy of the question.
No, I hear you.
But I think the tone really does reflect what kind of campaign and what kind of message that they're going to bring in an election that'll happen really soon, and it just doesn't seem right for what Canadians are expecting. And this is not the only thing they're doing this on.
No,
there are many
look,
other issues, right?
I am getting attacked by people just for raising what are we doing here? Look, asking for disclosure is one thing.
Yeah, for sure.
If you're going to accuse someone of putting their self-interest ahead of their country, you should have some proof of that. But the disclosure, let's have some disclosure on these things. So Michelle, I just wonder, this is all going to happen on Sunday. The four candidates are there. You've been through transition, with the Paul Martin, Jean Chrétien years were slightly different than these right now. But then very quickly, that was a majority Liberal government in a stable political situation. This is not. How quickly do you think whoever comes out of this on Sunday night needs to be ready to move to a general election?
Well, just reflecting back, you might remember a big elephant of a challenge that we faced taking over that majority government. But that aside, I think it's going to be really quick and something that Canada's never seen before. If we look to the Brits, who actually do their transitions in a very rapid period of time, where you go from one prime minister to a whole other prime minister and cabinet in less than a week, I think they've done it in. I think it's going to trend much more towards that than our typical 3 weeks or so where we kind of put everything together and have an orderly transition. But all that being said, it is just such a different circumstance. It is a time when, as both Cameron and Laura have said, everyone is focused on what is happening with the United States. That is the sole issue that is preoccupying Canadians. That will be the ballot question. And, I think that Mr. Carney quite rightly will be wanting to seek a mandate for himself as he deals with this monumental issue and expects to lead Canada in a way that kind of needs to change a little bit to be able to face this threat. So I think that it's going to be a very swift and fast-paced 3 weeks to kind of keep up with everything.
Right.
But it will all happen as it should.
Laura, no matter who wins this, I mean, it feels like you've got to have a new cabinet and a PMO ready to go by Wednesday, Thursday. Like, is that the timeline you're seeing? And maybe an election that starts the week after or within 2 weeks of that?
It certainly seems like that's the timeline, David. For your viewers who maybe don't know, but this entire cabinet will leave with the Prime Minister, and they could be sworn in again. But whomever becomes the Prime Minister is going to have to turn a cabinet around and an entire staff really quickly. And to put it into perspective, that's a lot of people. That's not 5 or 10 people. We're talking 50 to 100. Yeah. That is huge, huge from a hiring perspective, a change management perspective. There are also, whoever he puts in his cabinet, they all also have to be staffed up as quick as possible. So this is very quickly. And then there, to your point, is the campaign of it all. And a lot of the people from whomever wins from their campaign are going to move over to the party to continue campaigning, because really that's what they've all been doing at this point. And that is going to be really challenging. It's a really condensed timeline, and it takes a lot of people. Cameron and Michelle have both been a part of this, as have I. It's hard to do this much this fast, so I really feel for everyone who is about to be a part of it.
No, it's going to be fairly frantic. And look, we're going to be a bit frantic in the time we have left. We've got about 4 minutes left in the show. Cameron, your old boss hasn't got a lot of time left. It's been a hell of a last couple of weeks with everything that's happened, and it's almost like this big transition we're going through has been overshadowed because of what's happening in the United States. Just what are your thoughts? You worked with Justin Trudeau for a lot of years. Now that he got emotional, what do you think? How are you feeling right now about all of this?
Well, I think he is right now at his best because, as you talked about earlier with one of your guests, he has an ability to rise to the moment when the country and Canadians are feeling a lot of stress and a crisis. I think we saw that with the pandemic. We saw that with, obviously, our response to Ukraine. We saw that with the first Trump White House and the renegotiation of NAFTA, when everybody, or at least the vast, vast majority of people, are feeling a sense of they need something from leadership from their government. That's when he's been able to step up. I think what's been more controversial is his economic legacy and the big social programs that he's brought in. And I do think history will judge them, or at least the decisions he made, which took vision and they took guts and they were not easy to bring forward. I think they will judge them kindly because what they have done is, despite how expensive they were, have set the foundation for a much more sustainable future for a lot of hardworking Canadians who now rely on a lot of these programs. And it brought
Canada Child Benefit, these sorts of things.
Canada Child Benefit, tackling poverty, dental program, prescription pharmaceutical, like all kinds of things that took a lot of investment, and of course, bringing reconciliation to the top of the agenda, which is something that I think any future prime minister from any other party is going to really struggle to fail to meet up to that. And of course, on the environment, extremely controversial. But how will we judge, the decisions that were made today in 20, 30 years' time? I think we will judge them well.
But Michelle, a bit of a recalibration seemingly throughout the course of certainly this leadership race, and the Conservatives still the front runners in most polls, obviously a very different direction. I mean, what's your sense I'll give you about 60 seconds on just where things are as Justin Trudeau says goodbye?
Well, first of all, I think he's had his best moments as Prime Minister over the last few months. And I'm really glad that he's been able to do that, both for the country, because I think we've all benefited, and also for himself, so that he can go out, hopefully, feeling very proud of how he led us through this part. I think that, as I said, the issue set is so singular at this point that it's going to be a very stark by-election in terms of one-on-one, Mr. Carney versus Mr. Poilievre. Who do you think can actually handle Donald Trump the best? And who do you think can handle Canada's economy, and set us up for success in spite of the threat down south of us? And so I think that everyone is very clear about what this is going to be about. And the last thing that they need, either party, but especially the Liberals, is any distractions. For Mr. Carney, he's got a steep learning curve. Boy, he's never knocked on a door. It is, it's going to be a tough election campaign.
Right.
One of the toughest probably we've seen in Canada.
Okay.
And he's a complete novice. So it's going to be interesting.
That is going to be interesting to see. Laura, your thoughts as someone who worked for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. We've got about 45, 50 seconds.
I won't repeat what Cameron said because I think Cameron really articulated the Prime Minister's legacy quite beautifully. I will say one thing that I think he really changed the game for how we campaign in this country. The humanity Justin Trudeau has shown over, since he became leader really in 2013, the way he interacts with Canadians one-on-one is really changed the way I think most Canadians expect their leaders to act. And when it comes to campaigning, he is so energetic. He's so passionate about it. Canadians expect something different now when they watch people campaign across this country. And I think it's one of those things that probably only nerds like us think about and talk about. But it's something Canadians probably should pay a little bit of attention to because that's pretty massive in the way they make their decisions.
So Trudeau is vowing not to be a caretaker prime minister, but what will the transition to his replacement actually look like? David Zussman is the former head of Prime Minister Jean Chrétien's transition team. He's an adjunct professor at the University of Victoria and the author of Off and Running, a book about Canadian government transition. So David Zussman, you're the perfect guy to talk to with everything that's happening right now. Thanks for being here, sir.
Well, thank you for the invitation.
So the Liberals are going to choose a new leader on Sunday. We've got a pretty good handle on how that's going to work. What happens on Monday when the party has a new leader, but Justin Trudeau is still prime minister?
Well, that's a very good question, actually, and a lot of it depends on actually how much time the candidates have spent preparing to take over the levers of power on Monday. In fact, there are a whole number of issues to be dealt with fairly quickly, actually. But first, of course, will be, in fact, the transfer of power. Or the reins of power from Justin Trudeau to the winner on Sunday night, and the date for that handoff, in fact, is yet to be determined. It could be as soon as a couple of days, and it could be a few weeks. To a large extent, that depends on Mr. Trudeau and his own agenda. From what I've seen in the last week or so, he's been extraordinarily busy. Not only has he been traveling to international capitals. He's also been pronouncing on a number of very important foreign policy and trade policy issues. And I also noticed that he's been processing dozens and dozens of Order of Council appointments, in fact, as well. So he's been busy, but I don't know how much more he has left to do on his own agenda.
Who gets to make that call? Would it be the winner, or is it Justin Trudeau? Because it seems to me the winner would probably say, I want to start on this date, and would Justin Trudeau then have to say, okay, that's when it's over?
Well, I think that really is to be negotiated. In fact, there may be a strong preference by the winning candidate for a particular date, because, of course, they've done their own planning, and so it is subject to negotiations. But Justin Trudeau is the prime minister until he's not, and so ultimately it's his decision as to when he goes to visit the Governor General.
Okay, that's interesting. But when you look at the parliamentary calendar, with Parliament due to come back in March 24th, March 25th, around then, exactly. the political calendar being where it is, it feels like it will be a short transition period. And I wonder, when you ran it for Mr. Chrétien, it was after winning a general election and defeating an incumbent government of a different party. This is a handoff from one Liberal to another. How does that change things? So what's the difference there?
It doesn't really change it in substance, but it is different, a different time kind of transition, because one of the issues that the new incoming prime minister has to deal with is, in fact, has a lot to do with with familiar faces. He or she has got to put together a cabinet, for one thing, and also hire staff in the Prime Minister's office and maybe elsewhere. And so he's going to be dealing with a lot of incumbents. So one of the real complexity around handing off the power to a government already in power means that he or she has got to make some tough decisions about the members of the cabinet currently. Which ones does he or she want to ask to stay on, and which ones do they want to ask to leave? And leaving a cabinet is not an easy issue to deal with. We've seen this happen on a number of occasions in other elections, and we know from history that this is often a painful exercise.
Right.
So here we are in the moments of great excitement for an incoming prime minister. One of the first things they have to do is inform a number of people that they're not going to be along for the ride.
So, yeah, because the way this works, too, as I understand it, Mr. Zussman, is the Parliament endures, obviously, because this is not a parliamentary exercise, but the ministry changes. This is a whole new ministry we move to. So cabinet ministers will stop being ministers until they're reappointed and would need to retake the oath because it's functionally a new government. But, let's say, for example, Mark Carney wins, as the strong suspicion is and the indications are, him not being an MP. The last time we had this was when John Turner took over in 1984. He had been an MP, but wasn't when he became Prime Minister. How does that complicate things in a transition period?
Well, that's a very good question, and that will probably have a significant impact on the timing of the next general election. So the new leader and the new Prime Minister won't have a seat in the House of Commons. And so I suspect if it's Mr. Carney, he'll have to delegate someone from the ministry to take on a large role in the House of Commons. But, this is not going to be sustainable for a long period of time after March 24th and 25th. I mean, the leader of the opposition will demand to see the Prime Minister in the House and to be accountable for his government. So I suspect at that point in time, we're going to have a very short-lived session in March.
I guess the continuity challenges and the complexity of handing over the trade file issues, Ukraine, Gaza, all of these things, because the government is changing in a technical constitutional sense, but it's liberals handing off to liberals. That reduces some of the complexity, but these are still the challenges in cabinet making and these things. So,
but we don't know how different it's going to be.
Exactly.
Frankly. Again, it's very hard to tell from what we've seen and heard during the leadership campaigns, because at this point in time, the candidates are really trying to appeal to liberals. And so the messaging is going to be very different than the messaging they have for Canadians at large. And more important even than that, I suspect, is what is their policy orientation going to be for all of these hot files, of which we have many to deal with in the very short term.
Yes, but presumably security clearances for existing ministers would be in place. Vetting for potential ministers would be largely done. They would be known, right, even with a change in whoever takes over here. So given all of that, given that there are things to be negotiated between the incoming Prime Minister, the outgoing Prime Minister, obviously with the PCO, staffing up a new PMO, dealing with Rideau Hall, with that and the political calendar, what's your sense of how quickly you think we might see this actual formal transition? I mean, do you think it could if this is Sunday, could we be doing this by Wednesday or Thursday, or do you think it just might, by necessity, push into a week beyond that?
Well, I think for one thing, the Privy Council office has been monitoring, obviously, this leadership for weeks now, and so they're going to be ready. So I don't think we have to worry about the timing with regard to readiness. The timing is simply going to be political, therefore, or not so much political, but it's maybe practical, in the sense that there is so much going on from a policy perspective, particularly with respect to Canada-U.S. relations, that we can't really create a vacuum in terms of leadership, and the signaling would be very poor, particularly to the Americans, that if we don't have a government in place soon to deal with them, they may make decisions that won't be easily countered one way or the other. So I suspect we're going to be seeing things happening more quickly than slowly.
Yes, leaving a vacuum for Donald Trump and this administration would not be a good idea, I don't think, at this point in time. I just wonder, just based on that, you've got people like Dominic LeBlanc, who are the finance minister and have built relationships with Howard Lutnick and these things. When you're coming in a moment like this, I guess you got to weigh that, right, when deciding what changes you may make with cabinet, that if you want a different person there, but the relationships are built and they're texting and talking, what do you do?
Absolutely, and that's all part of the planning that I hope has been going on for the last few weeks, which I realize will be very difficult to do, but because again, the candidates have been busy trying to get Liberals to support them, and these sorts of details, are not usually very attractive to people casting their votes. So. But I'm expecting that all of these sort of things have been under consideration, and part of them is the issue of continuity. But you also have to decide whether the relationships that currently exist, for instance, are viable going forward. And maybe this is an opportunity to introduce some new players into the conversation, recognizing fully well that the new players won't have the history and won't have the knowledge of the files. So they'll have to work up to a knowledge base that's compatible with the issues at hand.
Yeah, more topsy-turvy times ahead for us yet on this one.
That's for sure.
That's for sure. All right, David Zussman, former head of Prime Minister Chrétien's transition team. Thank you for your time today, sir. We really do appreciate the insight.
Well, and thanks for the opportunity to chat with you.